We are now going to see the nature of Kubernetes project and the nature of the Swarm project. So both are different projects by different communities, and we're going to now see how we can leverage both these things. Okay, maybe that can give you some kind of an idea on how to choose. Okay, so if you see this Docker Swarm, first let me try to one end. I just try. So, and one side we shall have the Kubernetes. So, okay, fine. So this is the Docker Swarm. Docker Swarm. And this is the Kubernetes. Okay, so Docker Swarm and the Kubernetes. Okay, so you see now both these things are container orchestrators and the clustering mechanisms. Okay. Now, what we are going to see here in this place is, you see, first I'm going to start with, parallelly try to have some small comparisons. The Docker Swarm is something which is built by the native Docker community. Okay, and it is a part of the Docker company itself. Okay, native cluster implementation by Docker company itself. Docker or Docker community. So this is a native cluster implementation. So this is a part of the Docker engine itself. That's why I use the word native. It's a part of Docker engine itself. The next thing is, when it comes to Kubernetes, Kubernetes is not a part of, it is something which is built by, actually originally started by the Google, but it is now a project comes under CNCF community. Okay, so basically we can say it like it is maintained by CNCF community. So they are the contributors and maintainers of the Kubernetes stack. Okay, and Kubernetes uses so many projects from the CNCF community. Okay, CNCF. Okay, so that's how Kubernetes is being developed. And when it comes to the networking level stack of Docker, you know that in the Docker, I told we have something called as the CNM. So we learned that. So it's called CNM. Okay. So Docker's networking stack is called as CNM, which is otherwise we can call it like the Docker CNM, which means container networking model. So this is also a library which plugs with the Docker, which is inside, which will be deployed along with the container. So in the Kubernetes, you have a project by CNCF, which is called as CNI. Okay, CNI. So the project name is CNI. CNI stands for the container network container network interface. It's called the container network interface. That's what we call as the CNI. And the CNI is a library, actually, and which is built by CNCF community again. Okay, so this is also a part of CNCF community. CNCF community. It's also a part of the CNCF community. And you see, we Kubernetes uses this container network interface project or the library to power network interfaces for containers, or in their term, it's pods. And then we have another important thing to look. So next thing is in the context of container runtimes. Okay, so today we will learn what is a container runtime. So how Kubernetes switches between the container runtime. So those kinds of things also I'll be trying to show. So in terms of container runtimes, you see the Swarm cluster is a, because it is a dedicated or it is built by the native Docker community, and you can't see it supports different container runtimes. So Docker Swarm cluster only supports the Docker engine. It does not support any other container runtimes. Okay, so which means it only supports only supports Docker. So it does not support even directly the container also. Okay, so that is the first important thing to look inside here. And if you see in the same thing in the Kubernetes, you will be able to see Kubernetes actually supports different container runtimes. Okay, so very similar thing. So in terms of container runtimes, it can support container D. Container D is the default one, so this is the default container engine or container runtime which is included. And then you have the Docker engine directly, it couples with that. Okay, and then you also have the CNCF based CRIO. Okay, and then you have Mirantis. Mirantis is an enterprise Docker. Okay, so it supports all these things. I will be slightly more elaborate on these kinds of things in the next upcoming slides. Okay, so for now, you just need to know things by name in order to get started with the Kubernetes. So that's why I'm just throwing the names. That's all. So these are all the important facts to know about. A small comparison, not a big comparison. And one more point which I wanted to add is this native clustering called Docker Swarm, which is built by the Mabi project team. So I told that we have in the Docker we have a Mabi project is responsible for building the Swarm kit, the container D. So they actually developed more of it. So by the Mabi project, that's also a part of Docker community. And finally, I want to throw two more important or three more important words. You see, these are all small variations. Okay, so when it comes to Docker, you see this is by the Docker community and it uses a networking stack which is different. And when it comes to Kubernetes, it is different. So it's all just different things I'm just trying to quote. Now I'm going to quote the common things. Okay, so the common things are so Docker Swarm is a container cluster. Okay, so it's a container cluster. And what more we can tell Docker Swarm? Docker Swarm is a, we can also call it as a another point, container orchestrator. Okay, so that point also I try to add it here. So it's a container orchestrator. Okay. Now, similarly, when it comes to Kubernetes, in the internet language, you may have learned that it's a container and cluster automated. So you see so many terms. I want to add one more extra term which can provide more different context for the Kubernetes. So Kubernetes is also a container cluster, and Kubernetes is also a container orchestrator. So both the things are same, but I want to give one more extra name for it. And that is, this is also a container cluster. And the extra name is, it you can consider Kubernetes as something like a framework, and which I usually tell people that it can be considered like a framework. Suppose if you are from a development background, you may get a sense on what I am trying to talk about. Okay, Kubernetes is a container framework also. Why I say Kubernetes is a container framework means because that is the nature of the project. It integrates with so many other things. Okay, so Kubernetes is not just Kubernetes is a kind of an stack. Okay, you can plug and play with the different levels of things, and that is why we can use, this is a very good word to use to define what is the Kubernetes. You can say Kubernetes is a container framework. Okay, framework. Why I say this means you can say that Kubernetes plugs and play with the different container runtimes and different container networking drivers. So this is why I would like to always mention this Kubernetes project itself as a framework, okay, which can plug and play with the different components. Okay, so I can put it together. Can plug and play with different uh, different container runtimes and network drivers. Not just this alone, there are other so many reasons we have to justify this point. Okay, when you define Kubernetes, you can say it's a container cluster, it's a container orchestrator, and you can also say it's a container framework. Okay, but Docker Swarm is not that kind of a cluster because a Docker Swarm is mostly limited or concentrated towards the Docker's community alone. Okay, and that is one of the reasons why Kubernetes is big and Docker Swarm is a lightweight cluster. Okay, so these are all the first key differences which we need to take uh, in this learning.